back to my channel. I'm Deanna and you're watching Orchid. I've had a few requests to show you guys how I water my orchids, how I fertilize them, the differences between summer and winter for me, and I guess the main reason I've been putting off doing this video is because I break a lot of rules and I don't want to give the wrong, I guess, impression to you guys. So I want to preface that this is how I water my orchids, how I choose to, and that I sort of do it with some risk. I accept some risk for the benefits that I see in the method. So the main rule that I break is that I share my water. And this is not advocated in the orchid hobby. The main reasons being that sharing water is a great way to transmit disease. So, you know, this is viruses, I guess infections can all be transmitted via sharing water. Now, I have orchids that I trust in my collection and orchids that I don't trust in my collection, and I know my collection very well. New orchids that come in are automatically in the don't trust section, so they get watered separately for quite some time until I am happy with them, and that's usually around the 2-month mark. They're growing well. I haven't noticed any signs of pests or disease, but the trusted ones get watered together. But even the ones that I don't trust, I'll show you how I watered them as well. It's from this water, but I dump the, I guess, runoff separately. So there are several reasons why I choose to share my water. One of the main ones is because I use RO water. You can see I'm filling it up here, and it's filled up just over halfway. The system has a reservoir, and so there's an automatic pumping system. I think you can hear the water getting delivered to that storage unit, and that's about 11 litres, and that fills it up to about halfway. And so the flow is okay to about then, and that takes about 7 minutes to fill this bucket up halfway, and then the flow just completely drops off. So I'll see if I can show you. But can you see how low that flow is? And it will become a trickle in a second because there's not going to be much water in that unit. So it actually takes me a long time to fill up this bucket. So that's quite time consuming. In summer, I still have to do this every 2 or 3 days. In winter, it's about every 5 to 7 days. So you can see how labor intensive that is in summer. And I suppose that's the other aspect of it. My lifestyle doesn't lend itself to difficult watering. Like even this week, because I've just been at work like 11, 12 hours every day, and it's been a particularly busy week, and it's winter, I can't water my orchids at night time. And yeah, I just haven't had time. The orchids haven't been watered for about 5 or 6 days. I haven't even been able to check them really for 5 or 6 days, so it's going to be a big watering session today. If I was to continue to refill this bucket, it would take me ages. I've got like nearly 300 orchids, so it's largely a convenience thing as well. But anyway, we're going to move this bucket over to my watering area, and I am going to mix up a nutrient solution. If you can see there now, that trickle of water, so it's really slow flow. So what I'm going to do at this stage is probably top up with one of those jugs. Alright everyone, so the other reason I haven't done a watering video yet is because I have a lot of crap, and I like to use stuff up, and I like to rotate through products, and I mean I have my own little justifications in my head, but I don't have a proper schedule, and I just follow a few basic rules that I don't think are based on any pure science or anything like that. They're just my rules. But anyway, I'll explain to you, I guess, my process of thinking, and just give you like an overview, I guess, of my thought processes when I'm mixing up my nutrient solutions. So here are my balanced fertilizers, and by balanced I don't mean like they have an NPK of 20-20-20. I mean they've got the macronutrients, they've got micronutrients, trace elements, they've got calcium, magnesium, and I've got a powdered one here which I haven't opened because I'm trying to use up my liquid fertilizers, but if you have a look you can see it's got NPK in it, it's got calcium, magnesium, This one's got a bit of seaweed in it as well, but you can see it's got basically everything in it. And then over here I've got the ones with specific nutrients. So this is my CalMag, so it's got calcium, magnesium in it. And down here we've got, and these were kind of gifts. Most of them have been given to me, some of them I bought myself, but these were leftovers from someone else's collection. This is a PK top-up. It's a general one, it's not an Orchid one. It's basically like a bloom booster. It's got phosphorus and potassium. And this is the Nitro K, which is nitrogen heavy. Now over here we have, I guess, my supplements. So when I flush, sometimes I add in these supplements in very low quantities. So I know that technically doesn't make it a flush, but they're in quite low concentrations. So here I've got silica, I've got seaweed concentrate here, and Epsom salts or magnesium. What I do in winter, as I mentioned, the water gets changed about every 5 to 7 days in winter, and in summer it's about every 2 to 3 days because I'm using a lot more water. So in winter I alternate between a nutrient solution and a flush. Now that doesn't mean I monitor every single plant, however I water my plants when they need watering, and whatever solution I have sitting there, that's what they get watered with. And in summer I basically flush every third water change, and that's because in the warmer months that's basically my growing season. So that's when I also start to bring in my CalMag and nitrogen. So often I'll just make a solution up of CalMag and nitrogen, and that will be my nutrient solution. I don't often add my CalMags or magnesium to my nutrient solution. I usually use that in isolation, plus or minus maybe some extra seaweed, and I'll show you why that is. So you'll see here this pH chart with nutrients, and I'll keep in mind that this is a hydroponic pH chart, so this is for growing basically without medium, but obviously I do use medium, and I use organic medium, which is going to bring my whole solution down a few points basically because it's a little bit more acidic. But you can see that the nitrogen, potassium doesn't really matter, they will get absorbed, whereas phosphorus and a lot of the micronutrients are sitting at the lower end of the spectrum. And so when I'm mixing up that balanced fertilizer solution, I usually aim between 5.5 and 6.5 to ensure that, you know, these guys get absorbed, and even more towards the 6 range, because I know that it'll end up in my pot, I guess, you know, probably about 5.8 if I'm aiming for 6. Whereas if I'm giving calcium and magnesium, I'll probably actually aim somewhere between like 6 to 7. So I guess that's my pH targets when I'm giving my solutions. Stuff like silicon and seaweed, as far as I'm aware, it's not really guided by pH, the absorption, because they don't rely on, I guess, being in an ionized form to be absorbed. The pH doesn't matter, so for my flushes I don't bother with looking at my pH targets. In fact, silicon itself is usually kept in quite a basic solution, and so I don't mind that too much. Every now and again my pots are getting a little bit of a basic flush. I guess if there's any dissolved salts and stuff, that's going to bring down the pH. Sometimes bringing up that pH a little bit, I feel that that's a good thing. However, that is not based on any science. This is why I'm a bit hesitant to give you my information, because it's just kind of what's going on and ticking over in my brain. So the solution I'm mixing up today is just this strike back for orchids, which we're just getting to the end of the bottle. There's not too much left, and I know that this is a 40ml cap. So I'm actually going to measure out about 15 mils and put it into here. Now I'm just going to top up this because I kind of have mixed this up enough times to know approximately how much I need. So I fill it up to about this level. This is just more RO water, so I'm just topping this up. And just give it a good shake because this one does have some seaweed in it. Anyway, I've got 15 mils. Okay, so I always measure the TDS before I begin my watering session, and my pH as well. Except for my flushes, I only measure the TDS if I have added something to it. Between summer and winter, there is normally a bit of variation between the TDS just because of the water temperature. On really cold days, I have actually boiled some RO water and added the boiling water into here just to bring the temperature up a little bit. So in winter, I aim for a TDS of between 100 and maybe 150, 180. But in summer, I aim for between 150 and about 250. And I know that as I start to water my orchids, the TDS actually goes up because some of the dissolved salts in the pots from other pots starts to run through. So I do my watering session, and every now and again I'll check my TDS and make sure that it's not above 350. That's sort of my upper limit. Every watering session, if I'm using the same water, I top it up with fresh RO water and re-measure the TDS. So that's my rule. I just don't let it get above 350 at any stage. And like I said, you know, every few days I'm changing this water, but I will use it for a few days and just top up with RO water because obviously the level will decrease as well. That's just to keep on top of it for a few days. And I do that for all the reasons I mentioned before. And yeah, so that's the TDS. So it's 112, and I'm going to keep it at that because after my watering session, this solution is probably going to rise by about 50 parts per million. That's pretty average. And I'm actually fine with that. So let's get the pH now. So this takes a little bit to measure. I'm just got to give it time to get its reading. I'll do another video probably on the pH meter, TDS meter, how I calibrate it, that sort of stuff. I have found great results by switching to RO water, monitoring my TDS, monitoring my pH and adjusting. But I did join my local orchid society, and most of those guys don't bother with all this stuff and they get good results, so hey. But I know Brisbane water's very hard. Our tap water's like 260 parts per million, so yeah. Alright, so I think it's settled there at 6.3. So 6.3 is fine because in my pots the pH is going to be slightly lower, so maybe a couple of points lower. And like I said, I actually don't mind my pH sitting between maybe 5.8 to 6.5 for my balanced nutrient solutions. And also keep in mind that pH is a logarithmic scale. And so the difference, so 7 is neutral, the difference between 7 and 6 is different to the difference between 6 and 5. So the difference between 6 and 5 is going to be 10 times as big as 6 and 7. So you might find that when you're trying to adjust the pH between like around the range of 7, your pH meter can jump more rapidly with say a few drops of pH up or down. So I'm not going to adjust, but if my pH was say 4, I would definitely adjust up to between 5.8 and 6.5 for this. Okay, so I've got this tray of orchids here. These are all safe orchids. I'm happy with their health. This is my usual watering technique. This is how I water. So I've got this guy here, and basically I just run water into the pot. put it on a tray and I let it drain. And so you can see this is actually one of my orchids that's still in its original pot, but I'm quite happy that it doesn't have pests. I've had this one since about February now, so it's been at least 4-5 months. It's almost time to repot it actually. I can see new roots growing in there. I'm not sure if you guys can see. I'm gonna drip everywhere now. So I'm going to repot this one really soon. But it just gets treated like the others now, but for the first couple of months I did have it separated. So you guys can't see, but I've actually got another bucket over here, and this is my unsafe orchids bucket. Basically there's a select few orchids in my collection that I don't completely trust. Maybe I know they've had fusarium in the past, or maybe I'm treating them for an infestation of, say, scale or something at the moment, and so instead of watering over this bucket, I'll water over the other bucket. So that water, that runoff, doesn't get mixed into this. However, everything else just gets watered together. Yeah, that's basically how I water. The Vandas also get soaked in here, so they'll just, often I'll have one Vanda soaking in here and use the other side of the bucket to water like a tray of orchids like this. Other nutrient solutions, I still do the same thing, but I guess my pH aims might be a little bit different. And for my flushes, so if I'm mixing like a little bit of a magnesium top up or seaweed with the flush, then I keep my TDS under 50. And so I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but the starting TDS of my RO water is 10. And like I said, my tap water sits around the 260 mark. Even in summer, the highest TDS that I'm aiming for with my nutrient solutions is really around the 250 mark, like absolute max. And so that's still lower than my tap water TDS, which is quite bad really. I think that's, considering that's meant to be our drinking water, I never thought about it before. But yeah, when water dries up for us, there's a very clear calcium deposit in the glass. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I wasn't too confusing. I find it difficult to explain these processes, and I just have my little system in my head, but I don't have a proper schedule or anything like that. Things get watered when they need to get watered, and basically I just ensure that this nutrient solution has an acceptable TDS and an acceptable pH to water the orchids with. I accept the risk of disease transmission in my collection. I think that because I know my orchids quite well, that risk is low, and I do take caution with my newer orchids. So yeah, I mean, I need an efficient system. For example, like this week, I've had an extremely busy work week, and I haven't tended to my orchids in about 6 days, so they are all bone dry. It's a full watering session ahead for me, and that takes me hours. So even with this system, which I believe to be fairly as efficient as I can get it, you know, my orchids are in trays, not in individual pots at the moment, so I can just bring trays over, water them like this and put them back. Even then, it still takes me hours to water my collection. I need to conserve that RO water a little bit, and I need something with a little bit of speed to it. So please guys, as I mentioned, this is how I do things. I'm not saying it's the right approach or the safe approach. This is the method that I've used to make it fit in and work for me. These rules, I guess, exist for a reason. I've personally not experienced any problems with sharing water, but there are plenty of stories out there on YouTube, on the internet, on forums, of spreading disease. I have enough experience with my plants that have been in my collection for a period of time, whether they are healthy or not, and whether I'm willing to share that water or not. But obviously you have to consider the background between why these rules exist and the benefits and risks, I guess, of the approach that you're going to take. So I hope you got something out of this video. Like I said, just do what works for you. Make sure you know the reasons behind why you're following certain rules and why you're doing things a certain way, and just make it work for you. If I water all my plants separately, I would never get through all my watering and most of my plants would dry out. That would probably result in a way worse outcome for my plants than the risk I take by sharing water. That's the way I look at it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more orchid videos. I hope you guys have a great week and happy growing until I see you next time. Bye.